Hello and welcome to the Rewire Your Attachment Style podcast. This is Maya Diamond, and I'm really excited to be here today with Riyaz Motan. Welcome.
Thank you. Excited to.
Yay. Riyaz is a friend and a colleague who I met through our dear mutual friend Tobin when I was living in Maui, and I quickly felt his depth and presence and really enjoyed getting to know him there. And then when I moved back to Marin, I've had the joy of getting to know him more. And when I thought about who I wanted to bring on to discuss this journey of moving from more avoidantly attached to secure, I felt intuitively called to speak to him. And also he commented on one of my Facebook posts, and that also kind of landed for me as, wow, it would be such an honor to talk to him about this journey because he is a seasoned therapist as well as been in a long-term committed secure marriage. So Riyaz practices as a psychotherapist, primarily working with individuals and couples. And over the last 12 years, his work has expanded to include teaching, supervising, training interns and therapists in graduate school counseling centers, as well as his own private classes and groups. He also offers retreats and events for healers and the general public. And there are two retreats coming up, meditation retreats. One is April 20th through the 23rd at Land of Medicine Buddha in SoCal, California. And the other is October 5th through the 8th at the Land of Medicine Buddha. And those are meditation retreats. Is that correct?
They're primarily meditation retreats, but they're a real mix of the psychological and relational, and it's really evolving as I go.
And
the
non-dual.
and the non-dual. So there's a
Beautiful.
lot of silence, a lot of meditation, but there's a lot of interaction and very kind of potent dialogue and inquiry that we do with words.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So first of all, I just want to start with the question of how long have you been married? And there's so many questions around this topic, but I wanted to ask, what do you think it gives you as a man and a human to be in this long, secure marriage?
Yeah. I've been married, boy, is it 23 years this August it'll be? I think that's right. Yeah, 2000. Or was it 2001? 2001, 22 years, I guess. Yeah. And boy, that's a big question. What does it give me? A lot. I was terrified to get married. I will tell you that. It took us 4 years before we were able to cross that threshold, or I would say I was able to cross that threshold. But here's a good way to talk about it. I thought when I was getting married that I was marrying my wife. And it's true. I was marrying Karen, but I realized soon after I got married that I was marrying my life. And so what I mean by that is it rooted me, it connected me, it deepened me into this embodiment, this amazing, precious life in a way I'd never been rooted before. I'd always been seeking the next horizon, the next pasture, the next person, the next adventure, the next whatever. And something stopped. And what I thought would be terrifying has turned out to be glorifying. Yeah.
Wow.
So I could say a lot more about that, but that's really the essence of it.
Yeah, that's so powerful. And can you speak, because we're really wanting to, go deeper around avoidant attachment in this interview. I'm wondering, can you speak to the terrifying? What was that for you?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of fear, a lot of projection of what marriage and a lifelong commitment would mean. And most of that felt terrifying in the sense, like it didn't feel like what I'm describing, which is rooting, expansive, deepening, glorifying, growthful. It felt like the opposite: constricting, confining, narrowing, imprisoning. It felt like, oh my God, I will lose my freedom. I will lose possibilities. And really, to go more and more into the psychology of it and the relational part of it, is I will lose my autonomy, and my life will become about my partner and my family and everybody else's needs. And so that part of me that was always craving freedom was always seeking the next, and the biggest was a way to preserve, or try to preserve, my autonomy, my freedom, my possibilities.
Yeah. And yeah, that's so huge in terms of the part that wants freedom and the part that wants connection. I'm wondering, I'm wondering if we can go back to the beginning. So I love, obviously, we're both trained as therapists. We love going into the roots of what kind of created who we are. And so I'm wondering, was there experiences or trauma or role modeling in childhood that you feel conditioning that you feel kind of helped create that path of avoidant attachment?
Yeah. There's probably a lot of different ways I could talk about that, but it's almost become more clear to me retrospectively through doing the work. And I see things more clearly now. So there's a few different elements, and it's one of these things that's hard to know where it started, how it started. I just have a sense of a bunch of things kind of constellating in my early childhood that just kind of led to this temperament, this kind of personality style or attachment style. So a couple things. One is, well, let's see, where do we go? There's so many different places. One is, okay, the most obvious to me that I understood for a long time was that my mom and dad split up when I was really young. I was probably less than 2 years old. I never remember them together. There was a lot of stress, even probably right from birth or even pre-birth, maybe, in the household. It was just a lot of crisis and upheaval. And so I was born into a lot of that, I think, and I just absorbed that. What happened very soon afterwards was that my mom became a single mom. We spent most of her time with her. She was pretty overwhelmed. I mean, I lived in an extended family, an Indian family in Kenya. So she had support, but she was a working mom. There was financial stress. There was emotional stress. There was just a lot going on. And then we moved when I was 10, not 9, actually, to Canada. My mom moved as a single mother. And so my experience was a lot early in my family was I needed to be good. I needed to not have too many needs. There was just so much going on. And particularly with my mother, I think there was a way that she needed me to be good and self-reliant in a way, easy. And so, I just became that. I don't remember deciding to do that. I just did that, So there was a way that self-reliance kicked in really early. And I also kind of got, I'm here to kind of take care of others. And even with her, to some degree, there was like a way that I kind of supported her and was a confidant and an easy kid. And so there was just a lot of pressure to not need her, not need others as much, and just rely on myself. So that was a big part of it. Something I'll say beyond that. And also there was a kind of this way that often I think can happen is I sort of became a bit of like a golden child. Like I sort of, the way that I got attention was by achieving, and pleasing and all those things. So my personality really became kind of oriented around that, academically, athletically, in other ways, being helpful, being good, being shiny. So that was a lot of what I understood. What I came to understand much later, probably in the last few years, honestly, through psychedelic work and deep kind of realization was, and I knew this cognitively, but I understand it now more somatically and emotionally. Early on, my father was diagnosed with brain cancer. And that was part of the stress that was going on before I was born, after I was born. And probably when I was a couple of months old, my father had to leave Kenya to go to England to get brain surgery for a tumor. And my mom went with him. And so they were gone for, it's hard to know exactly when, they don't remember, my mom doesn't remember, probably 6 to 8 weeks when I
Yeah.
was 2 months,
Wow.
2 to 4 months old.
Wow.
So there was a pretty dramatic attachment wound there, aloneness, and I've kind of I've known about it for a long time, but I really uncovered it experientially and somatically and energetically as a terror, an abandonment terror that was really at the core. And how I understood that actually when I really went into the journey and worked with it was almost like a decision before I could even make a conscious decision to not need others.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it goes really, really early.
Really early.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really powerful. Thank you for sharing all of that. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. It's a lot. And I think so many of our listeners can relate to elements of what you said. I have a feeling in terms of, maybe having a single parent that wasn't able to really connect with you and attune to you because they were so emotionally dysregulated themselves, or maybe having exactly that's something that's common, which is an early attachment wound where the parents or one parent, the primary caregiver, maybe has to leave and go to another country. And so there's this missing feeling as well as that break and rupture in the connection. So that makes so much sense. And it's also helpful. It's also fascinating to hear because a lot of what you described around the single mother, I also experienced, but I went more anxious and you went more avoidant. So it's also a great example of insecure attachment and how it can go either way, even with similar circumstances.
Yeah.
So
it's a great point, which I really think about it is like, there's nature and nurture,
Right.
And so there's clearly, I'm describing the nurture aspects, the conditioned experiences that maybe pushed me in a particular way towards insecure attachment.
Yeah.
But there's also probably something maybe temperamentally, maybe karmically, maybe biologically in different people, astrologically, who knows, right? That kind of will maybe bend us or direct us in towards one of those two coping styles or attachment styles.
Yeah.
And so for me, maybe there was something really early in that abandonment that I'm talking about that kind of conditioned me that way. Who knows what? But there was something in me that was already disposed to go inwards and self-reliant. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's where also, just curious, do you feel like your father is more self-reliant?
It's interesting. I didn't know my father very well.
Yeah.
He passed when I was a teenager.
Okay.
And so it's really interesting. This is another interesting thing. I never saw my mother and my father in relationships. They weren't together when I was too young to remember them being together. And then my dad was never, that I knew, when we would see him on the weekends or visit with him, in a relationship. And my mom actually stayed single for most of my childhood, and wasn't really until my later adult life that she's reconnected. So she went really avoidant, actually. Interestingly. My mom is more avoidant in some ways.
Okay.
Interestingly enough.
Okay.
I don't know my father's attachment style. In some ways, he might, actually, as I think about it, he probably was more anxious. He was more relational in a certain way. He was that way with us. And so I would guess he was actually more that way. Interesting.
Okay. Yeah. So maybe there was some modeling of the avoidant attachment from your mother, possibly.
I think so.
So that's definitely something I'm always looking at with my clients, which is, what is the modeling that you grew up with in terms of because exactly, it's like an imprint over and over again in terms of how you are being related to. So that's super interesting. And I'm curious, what do you think is the scariest thing about this journey of healing avoidant attachment? I say that because I think it's really important for the listeners. I find with avoidant attachment that there's so much fear, unconscious fear and conscious fear of doing the work. Avoidance, I think avoidant, obviously there's avoiding the work of looking at the avoidant attachment. And so it feels, I always tell people first of all, who tell me that they're avoidantly attached, I say, first of all, that I'm so honored, because I feel like it's so courageous to actually just own whatever your attachment style is, and to just say what it is, and just to share that, because that's the first step of healing it, right? But then also for men and women that I work with who are like, I'm more avoidant, I want to work with it. It's like, it's such a courageous act to work on your insecure attachment style, whether it's anxious, whether it's avoidant, whether it's disorganized, fearful avoidant. So I'm curious, but I really want people to kind of see from you that it's possible, that they can work on it, and that you will survive this experience of working on your avoidant attachment. So I want to really like presence the scary parts of it. Why is it scary? What is it that we're so afraid of? And so I'm curious from your perspective, what the scariest thing has been around really going deeper into it.
Yeah, I so appreciate everything you were saying, which I think it's actually really, I think hard for me personally, but I see it as well in my work. It's hard for avoidantly attached folks to recognize that they are avoidantly attached. It was for me.
Yes.
I just felt I was secure, and my partner was just so anxious, and and so it's the thing that's really hard about it is it's just, I just experienced myself as like, well, I'm pretty autonomous, I'm pretty independent, I'm pretty healthy, and if you could just be the same way, we'd have a great relationship. And I think our society can kind of reinforce that. The models of independence and autonomy are pretty strong. So it's really hard to recognize, I think, is what I want to just say.
And that's a great way that you described it, because you're just feeling fine.
Yeah.
So why would it be a problem?
Yeah,
that's a really good.
And so I guess I'll get to your question at the hardest thing about it, but I think there's layers that get all the way to it, because I don't think the hardest thing is what we discover at first. I think we discover layers on the way to the hardest thing, is what my experience was, honestly. And so what I'll say is, like, if I were to describe it, I haven't thought this through really well, so probably, may not come out really clearly. But the first layer is like, I'm okay and you're not okay. Like, just get okay and then we'll be okay, And so there's that defense. And then it's sort of like, and part of that is like projection. This is how I understand it now. I didn't understand it back then, which is my unfelt needs, my unmet needs, my anxieties, my fears. I experience them in my partner, and then I reject and judge them in my partner, or I try to heal them in my partner. And it's all kind of a proxy thing. So I don't recognize it in myself. I recognize it in the other. But then I either try to heal it in the other externally, because that's much safer, or I judge it and push it away. All that stuff. So I guess this is what I'm saying, is like, there's a lot of empathy I have for myself and for avoidance. It's like, there's a lot here, because the fears are so unconscious. They're so deeply unconscious. And so what I started to kind of recognize, and some of this I knew cognitively, because I am a therapist and I'm trained a lot and I see it a lot. So I could see that I was probably projecting some of my own fears, my own needs onto my partner. But it's one thing to know it cognitively and to even understand it theoretically, and another thing to find it in yourself. And
to feel it in your body,
and feel it in your body,
your heart,
exactly,
in your emotional world.
All of it. And so I would say, I'll say a couple of happy accidents really were like pivotal for me, and one of them, once again, I was talking about psychedelics earlier. This was like an accidental psychedelic experience. I remember Karen and I were years ago. This is before we had our son. Our son's 20, so this is before we got married even. And we were in our kind of dance, our avoidant anxious dance, and kind of really had a deep connection. And we're trying to make it work, but we're struggling. I was struggling. She was struggling. We were struggling. And we had this experience. We went to Harbin Hot Springs, where we would go often, kind of our little getaways. And this one weekend, somebody was selling these pot cookies or pot brownies, and we weren't planning to do this, but we were like, hey, that'd be fun, let's do it. And so we both split this big cookie, And it's a hilarious story. We have so many funny things that happen because of this. And it's often people will tell these stories. We ended up getting way more than we bargained for. And after all the fun and the kind of weird, kind of crazy stuff that was going on, which we can just laugh about now, I had taken more than her, and she started to come out of it, and we realized, oh my God, it's been hours and we haven't had dinner. Let's go make dinner. And they have a communal kitchen, but I was still in it.
Yeah.
And she was starting to be more in functional mode, like, let's make dinner. So we went over to the kitchen, and she started to make dinner, and I was dysfunctional. I was following her around.
Yeah.
And she would go over to the counter and she'd go over to the stove and she'd go, and I would just follow around like a little 2-year-old would be following her. And at some point she looked at me, she's like, what are you doing? And she goes, can you help? And I'm like, no, I can't.
Yeah.
And then she's like, okay, well, give me some space. we totally flipped our dynamic, right?
Totally.
And I was too terrified to give her space. I just wanted to be right next to her, like she was my mom.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it was just this, I couldn't help it. I just was in it. I mean, it's funny, I feel emotional talking about it.
Yeah.
But I got thrown into my little one, my little 2-year-old one. And she was my mom. I mean, I knew it was my wife, but
Right.
on an attachment level, an emotional level, from a safety, security point of view, I needed proximity. I needed to be next to her.
Yes.
So she was so kind to me. She was so great. She was loving, and she was like, sweetheart, just go over. There's these little tables. I don't know if you remember the old tables at Harvard in the old kitchen there. It was just like, 12 feet away. It wasn't far. She goes, she walked me over and she says, just sit down here, and I'm going to cook for us, and then I'll come over and bring the food over. Yeah. And anyway, I won't go into the long story of it, but I could barely tolerate the 12 feet. And then if somebody came and sat next to me, an adult came sat next to me, I'd walk back over to her. So it was this hilarious and like sad, but very funny moment of, and it went on and on for a while. And she was just so loving to me. And something started to kind of emerge for me. That was a pivot point where I got in touch viscerally, emotionally, somatically with the little one that had been abandoned and that needed attachment, needed her. And I simultaneously got in touch with a really beautiful thing, which is she was so attuned, and she was so warm, and she was so loving. And so a lot happened. One is I recognized, like, oh my God, all this stuff is in me that I kind of put on her. Yeah. Anxious, needy, all that in the pejorative ways. Like I found it in me viscerally, emotionally, somatically. Yeah. And I also recognized simultaneously, like, she's a really good person. She's a really safe, loving heart. I could probably let some of these feelings out and needs out with her. So that was a huge pivot point. It didn't solve everything. There was still lots of my own therapy and own work, and even our own couples therapy. Yeah. But without that kind of anchor of an experiential, oh, I know this. Once I know something, I can't unknow it. And there's like, this is the other thing I would say for people that are needing to do the work. And I think everybody has this, like, there's a truth teller in me. It's like more than just, I want to be safe. I want to be free. I want to be shiny, or all the egoic kind of things. There's like a deeper part that's like, okay, I want the truth. And I have that in me. And it's like, okay, once I discovered that, it's like, okay, I need to pay attention to this. I can't go underground with this anymore. I can't pretend anymore. Yeah. And that started to change all the work that built. Yeah. On top of that, I couldn't deny that experience was me, was in me. Yeah.
So powerful. Thank you for sharing that story. That's such a beautiful example of you really connecting with your little one, this young 2-year-old inside, and feeling viscerally what he felt and what he needed, and feeling that need for connection, that need for attachment, and that actually changing the course of your life, because you could always then relate to that experience in your partner, but also feel it inside of your body. So I'm just like, I really, I'm so grateful for that story, because vulnerability is the piece that I think avoidance can have so much detachment from. And so, but also in our culture, men are not really, especially, I think men and women, but especially men, are not supposed to be vulnerable, which then disconnects them from the feelings and the needs, because feelings and needs are vulnerable and sensations in a certain way. And so, like, you just modeling, like, yeah, like this was this vulnerable part that I really was connected with and was really experiencing on a visceral level. Like, it's so helpful to hear that and to feel that. And I think that's really this next paradigm that we're stepping into in our society, which is the more and more men and children and teenagers being able to really connect and share vulnerably and share their vulnerable feelings. And that, I was just talking to someone last night around how, like, a man who said, like, yeah, sometimes when I connect with my feelings, I feel like I'm a wuss for having feelings, right? And so that's what makes it so hard to connect and share these feelings. There's, in my opinion, like, this is the conditioning that we have around feelings that is so pervasive still in our society. It's like we're, with all these new movements, we're coming out of it, but there's still so much work to do. So yeah, thank you. And yeah, that and also I love that you spoke to this piece around, like, seeing, because part of this podcast we really talk about what are the qualities to look for in a healthy partner. And I love how you really saw, like, she is attuned and present and her heart is open and patient with me if I'm going through something, and how you really valued that and said, like, oh, that's what I want in my wife. Like, that's what I want in my long-term partnership. And that was so healthy of you, because I see so much with people that they're prioritizing things that, in terms of dating and relationships, that are not really the most important things, right? And in my opinion, that is if we want a secure partnership, then prioritizing qualities like patience and kindness and attunement and presence and devotion, commitment is so, so powerful. So I'm curious, if you now, let's say now, because now you guys have done all this work. So I'm curious what it looks like now that you've done a lot of work on yourself, both of you, and there is something that comes up that might be a little bit anxious avoidant. What does it look, how do you guys handle it now? What happens now? What does the conversations look like now?
Yeah, we've come a long ways, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And yeah, we have this container that just feels really deep, really strong. And stuff comes up, of course it does. And I still have my avoidant tendency, and she still has her anxious tendency, just like energetically, patterned wise.
Yeah.
So we still have that dance, but it just flows better. And when stuff comes up, let me think about it. Like, it's interesting. I was going to say the dance, we, for years, the early years, we did the same dance over and over again, the same painful dance. She'd feel abandoned, I'd feel engulfed. She'd pull on me, I'd push on her, and it just would, like, and it would just play out in all sorts of ways.
Yeah.
We don't really do that dance anymore. There's just so much kind of ease, and we just trust each other, So I can take space, and I don't feel like she's going to get in the way. If she has a need, like she's like, actually, no, I want to be together, or I'd love to, do that weekend together, or, she can just tell me about it, and then I can hear her needs. I don't react to it or judge it. And then it's just like the best way I can say it, and I don't mean to paint it like oh, we have this rosy, perfect relationship, is that both our needs are valid. And she can hear my needs and hold her needs, and I can hold my needs and hear her needs, and vice versa. And so there's like a generosity in it, because there's not threat in it. There's not like a sense of, we trust that we're both going to be okay at the end of whatever this is, even if it's a little tension or conflict or difference. Like, we just kind of trust we're going to get to the other side. And the only way we've built that trust is that we've gotten to the other side repeatedly, reliably, through listening. And well, I guess what I will say is that I can talk more about what my needs are and my feelings are, and she can talk about her needs and her feelings. And I don't judge or condemn her for her feelings, and she doesn't judge or condemn me for my feelings. And so once everything's out on the table, that it's above here's the way I think about it. And I, is that so much of our conflicts before, like I think about the iceberg metaphor, which is what's conscious is above the surface. And well, so much is below the surface. Like we're sort of like icebergs, you and I, or Karen and I. And before we would be having conversations above, what's conscious, what's visible, like, oh, I want this, oh, I want that, oh, we have a difference. But we would be avoiding what was below the surface for each of us. Either we would be avoiding talking about it, or a lot of times even avoiding being with it. And so as soon as you start to include what's below the surface, you don't, because what's bumping into each other, you don't see it on the is below the surface. These huge ice masses are bumping into each other energetically, emotionally, and you're in conflict and tension, and you can't see and understand why this little issue on the surface is so big. And so for now, because we can both drop into what our needs and our feelings are and our vulnerabilities are, we're not bumping into stuff that we can't see. We just like, here's what's going on for me. Oh, okay. We're talking about the weekend, or we're talking about this thing that happened or didn't happen between us. And then she can drop into what's really happening, what's getting stirred for her little girl, her needs, her feelings, her insecurities. I can drop into my little boy, my needs, my feelings, my insecurities. And then once we include those in the conversation, in the dance, it's so much less clunky. And our adults are available to work things out. But the kids aren't fighting under the surface.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's so huge for both people to really be aware and connected to the little ones inside, and to be able to speak from that vulnerable place, so that your partner, because then you have that understanding, like, oh, and compassion and empathy, like, oh my gosh, I get that makes you feel, really overwhelmed, and like, I don't want you to feel that way, right? So I think that's so powerful for both of you, to be able to share your vulnerabilities, and both of you to be able to be loving towards those vulnerabilities, because I think it can be so hard if one person is not able to be loving towards someone's vulnerabilities, or present, or just welcoming. It's really, really hard. That is really, really hard.
And can I just add something? What makes it easier to be loving towards somebody else's vulnerabilities is being in touch with your own vulnerabilities. And so like for me, it's helped Karen tremendously when all of a sudden she wouldn't feel the judgment or disdain or kind of pushing away of her vulnerabilities. But I couldn't do that until I actually found them in myself, because I was just projecting, and we don't even know we're projecting. I'm threatened by her neediness because I'm threatened by my own neediness. And so once that shifted inside of me, and I started to understand that, she could actually feel safer to just have her needs and her feelings and communicate them with me, knowing that I wasn't going to judge her or reject her or shame her for that. And so that just allows something different to happen. And similarly for me, once my own vulnerabilities and feelings came forward in me, Karen started to understand me in a different way, and attune to my young places. But before she would react to those young places, sometimes the young need for autonomy, because there's all sorts of needs, right? I think about it, I have like twins inside of me, little boys, like twins, really. There's a need for connection, and there's the need for autonomy. They're both there. I was really identified with one twin over the other, it was like the other one was like buried, like I don't have that, I'm just this guy, and it's like, oh, I've got both. And so now she can hear both sides of me, and she's not threatened by me in the same way. So she's got more space for me, and I feel that. I don't feel like I need to fight for that. I feel like I can just talk about it and include that in the conversation.
Beautiful. And I just want to highlight one thing, which is for all the people who are in the anxious avoidant dance, exactly, like, doesn't it make sense that you're so attracted to each other? Because the avoidant is like the path, and the healing for the avoidant is to feel their own needs and to actually get in touch with their own needs and feelings, which the anxious is already much better at. So there's this learning and this lesson and this shadow there. But then also for the anxious to learn that self-reliance, that autonomy, that independence, that, everything's okayness. Like, there's a lot of that self-regulation, right? And so there's so many shadows for the other attachment style. And I think that's part of the draw and the chemistry, is like that, those two kind of learnings. But unfortunately, exactly, like if you're not doing the healing work both on yourself and with your couple, then what happens is you just stay in that cycle over and over again, that push and pull, hot and cold cycle of pursuing and distancing, and you're never actually getting to the core root that's going to really heal it, which is that exactly emotional communication, vulnerable conversation, as well as connection with your own needs and feelings. Because exactly, we all have this, that's the thing that like is so interesting, is how much neediness is like this negative term in our culture, like needs. Oh, she's so needy. Like, wait a second. We as humans, we all have these plethora of needs, plethora of desires, plethora of feelings. And let's the more that we allow ourselves to own those in a really real way, the more we can communicate those to our partner and see, or our date, and see, how they respond, and see, if they are capable of being, the partner for us, as well as negotiating around those needs. So, yeah, thank you for sharing what that looks like now. That's quite an arc in terms of the shift that happened. And I can just feel the compassion for both of you that you have. Exactly. Like, we can feel that you're no longer in that disdainment or judging or pushing away. It's just like, oh, this is where she is. This is where I'm at.
And just to add to what you were saying, I totally agreed with everything you said, which is, and she's become a teacher for me of needs and feelings.
Yeah.
And I don't know if she would say this, she might, that
Yeah.
I've been a teacher for her of self-reliance and autonomy and kind of an inner directedness.
Yeah.
Because we both have those strengths and we both have those weaknesses.
Right.
And so
Totally.
our relationship has actually become a kind of a really fertile ground to kind of own the disowned aspects of our being and develop the underdeveloped aspects of our being. Yeah.
Beautiful. And I was gonna say, which is so I want to go deeper now. As some of you know, I have a very strong meditation practice. I've been kind of engaged in spiritual learning and practice for a very long time, since I was very young. My dad was very spiritual and was bringing us to meditation circles when we were children. And but also in the last couple of years, especially kind of starting with the pandemic, I've really gone deeper into my meditation and spiritual practice, which has been so powerful in terms of really connecting with this other dimension of reality. And I would love to, because that's something that's really important to you and something that you teach and also practice, I would love to kind of bring in a little bit around this piece around, how do you think a spiritual practice or meditation practice or faith in something bigger, because I have so many clients I work with who are Christian, Catholic, lots of different religions, who have a really strong faith. How do you think that can help us tap into more secure functioning in ourselves, in secure attachment ourselves, as well as in romantic relationship?
Great. Love that question. I didn't know that about your childhood and upbringing. It's cool. Yeah. And like for a lot of people, I think these last few years of the pandemic I think there's an opportunity that's opened up for people to go deeper, to really, really drop into what's essential. Yeah. As things fall apart seemingly more on the surface, So, but yeah, as you know, I that's a lot of my life is dedicated to spirituality and spiritual practice, but not just that. It's actually how that integrates and embodies in actual life and relationships and, in creative expression as humans. So ask me the question again, because I'm kind of like, I just go in 14 different directions, and I'm like, okay, what are you asking specifically?
Which is, I'm curious how really one developing their connection either with something bigger, either in meditation or some kind of spiritual practice, really can positively influence their internal secure attachment, as well as their secure functioning and healthy functioning in a romantic relationship. So kind of bringing relationship and spirituality, but how does that, because people don't talk about this enough. And I think that secure functioning is both about humans and our biological nervous system, as well as, but I think there's so many other things that help us become more securely attached. So I'm curious, because you also have been doing it for so long.
Okay, that's great. That helped kind of clarify what I wanted to say. So here's what I would say is that, the essence of most spiritual practices are to connecting to something that's more reliably, permanently secure, a force greater than ourselves, because we kind of recognize this consciously or unconsciously. Everything's impermanent, everything's uncertain, everything's insecure. Our minds change, our bodies change, people we love fall away, the planet's changing. I mean, there's just, in the manifest world, constant change, and you could call that uncertainty, you can call that impermanence, you can call that insecurity, is sort of the nature of things. And so in a way, for me, spiritual practice, meditation, non-duality, which is sort of the flavor that I've been drawn most to, is really seeking what's unchanging. Is there something that is actually secure? You might say, we're using this sort of language of attachment. And to me, there's a depth of being, a depth of presence that each of us are. And so you can also say that each of us has access to, but it's not on the surface of our experience. It's not in the foreground of our experience. It's through spiritual practice, through spiritual invitation, to fall back into, to drop down into, to relax out of our kind of foreground mind, full of mind kind of experience, into the silence of being, into the stillness of being. It's in the background usually. And the more you can cultivate that ability to sense that deep ground of being, you come into contact with what I would call the most secure base. We're always looking in relationship for a secure base, secure relationships, secure partner, and that's really real. For our nervous systems are designed that way. So it's a both and. It's kind of it's not an either or, and I'll have something more to say about that. But so if you can find and cultivate access to that secure ground that's always here, you always have access to, no matter what's happening on the surface of your life and the conditions of your life, then you start to come into a secureness and a stability that will help you be with the conditions of your life, the conditions of your patterning, whether you're avoidant or anxiously attached or disorganized. And so for me, I can describe what that's been like. What I'll say, and this is so interesting, I was talking about Karen and I being teachers for each other in certain ways. When we came into, we met at CIS, which is a spiritually oriented school with both therapists, and I was really drawn to the non-dual and to the transcendent, to the spacious aspect of being, to enlightenment. And there's a very pure draw to that, and I've always had that. But there was also mixed into it my own avoidance, which was, I wanted to escape the messiness of humanity, of relationship, of being a person. It just was like, and there's a lot of pain that was unconscious for me too. It's like I could rise above it. That's kind of what I was drawn to. And so that was mixed into my spirituality and my spiritual seeking. And when I met Karen, she was, interestingly enough, she was very kind of earth-based, women's spirituality, pagan, relationship, body, earth, mud, fluid, like it was all like very feminine, you know, it was like,
Yeah,
and so
sensations,
we were very
feelings.
different, but
Yeah.
interestingly enough, we were attracted to each other in that same way,
Yeah.
like in avoidance and anxious.
Yeah.
I was like drawn to her and also rejected her spirituality, and she was drawn to and also rejected my spirituality. And I would say over the years, it's been beautiful because I've incorporated so much of what she embodies so beautifully.
Mm.
And she's incorporated, she would say this too,
Mhm.
I know, so much of
Mhm.
the spacious quality of being that I kind of was
Mhm.
drawn to. So we've grounded each other out, you know,
Mhm.
and, you know, we've kind of integrated more. And so what I would say about that is
Yeah.
that for me, I would say this deep access to spacious, still,
Mhm.
deep being no
Uh-huh.
longer was like a way to escape it, but it was actually a way to be with it. It helped me be with the terrified places.
Yeah.
It helped me be with the sensations and the feelings
Yeah.
of feeling weak or scared or
Yeah.
alone, in a
Mm.
way that my personality would just shift back into those are dangerous, go back to self-reliance. But the more I could kind of tap into something that was beyond that
Mhm.
duality, then I could actually look at it like I talked about this sort of truth seeker in me. It's like, oh, I can be with whatever arises because I can touch into something deeper than what's arising. And it
Mm.
helped me
Mm.
to be with in a compassionate way, in a curious way, in a felt way, in a sensed way, all these shadow places, all these unfelt places. And so
Mhm.
for me, and that's a lot of what I teach and the way I work with people,
Mhm.
is to bring this secure base of being, to cultivate access to it. So then you
Mhm.
can go into the dark, shadowy places
Yes.
that normally would terrify us.
Yeah.
But it's like
Yeah.
you've got this like lifeline that's like,
Yeah.
okay, I know I'm okay, even as I go into not okay.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's helped
Yeah.
me come into the messiness and the scary
Yeah.
places and the human.
Yes.
And for Karen, I think it's helped her kind of also find a ground that was like, okay, I'm anxious, and her patterning would be to go towards me to take care of anxiety
Yes.
to make her feel okay. But
Yes.
if she can feel her anxiety and
Be with it.
be with it,
Mhm.
even heal it. I don't mean heal it exclusively because a lot of the healing comes through relationship,
Right.
but there's an inner relationship, right?
Yes.
That's
Yes.
also relationship. This like secure base within you.
Yes.
You can think about it like an adult, but it's even deeper than that. It's kind of like it's just a secure adult, kind of knowing stability in you. If you can invite the young, scared places, anxious or avoidant, because
Mhm.
the root of it is always kind of comes back to the same place. It's
Mhm.
really the terror of abandonment, of aloneness. Avoidance go one direction with it, anxious go the
Yes.
other, but it's the same terror underneath it
Yeah.
actually. And
Yeah.
so if you can use your spiritual practice and this deep base that you have access to and you cultivate to then allow yourself to be with the small, scared places, terrified places, you start to transform and soften and relax all these defenses, and you start to welcome the unwelcome places. So to me, that's how
Mhm.
this all works together beautifully.
Yes. Beautiful. I love bringing it together. I remember when I first, yeah, like when kind of around when I was in graduate school at CIS, and there was so much around spirituality, but I felt like people are not bringing together these relationship and spirituality. Instead, it's like, oh, if I'm spiritual, then everything's okay and it's healing all my childhood wounds, or if and so I think one thing, yeah, I just want to presence what you said around exactly. People call it mindfulness, people call it presence, people call it this connection with everything, exactly like how powerful that is inside of your being, and how powerful it is to connect to consciousness that is much higher than the egoic mind chatter. Because I think that's what happens when we get still, when we meditate, when we connect with something bigger, is that we're actually connecting with a yeah, a deeper level in our being. Exactly, that I love what you said, that can really, that can be an anchor, right? Because exactly, because of all this change, right? Your secure attachment can be this bigger presence and this bigger connection with something bigger, God, if you want to call it that, whatever you want to call it, whatever feels good, that actually can be a secure anchor. But then also it can be just a way that I think I want to add something, which you touched on as well, which is when we get dysregulated in relationship, when we get triggered in relationship, and our fight or flight or freeze or fawn gets triggered, and you may go into those younger places, then when you cultivate that presence and that like connection with something bigger, you can use that also to help you regulate in those moments, right? Because I think that's part of what meditation gives you, is that mindfulness and that stronger awareness. Part of your brain gets really developed. So then when you get triggered, at least you have way more awareness than you would if you didn't, which then can allow you to make smarter choices, which might be like, no, I can't talk about this right now, I'm too triggered. Or it might be like, okay, let me take some deep breaths so I can relax. Or it might be like, just being able to hear your partner and then reflect back to them what you've heard. So, this is such a big topic, and I know we're just diving into it in
So
the
much
end.
more, yeah.
Yeah, it's super fun. Maybe we can do another episode about this. I'm just, really, it's so, so powerful. And also, I just wanted to say that I love how you talked about that you guys had a different spiritual practice or different spiritual beliefs, because sometimes people think you have to have the exact same one and otherwise it's not going to work. And I just don't think that that's true. I think as long as it's a resource for both of you, and that you can exactly give understanding and support is the most important thing. And it sounds like you guys really grew to do that. So I wanted to ask you, for listeners whose partner is avoidant, but the partner is unwilling to do the work, so they're unwilling to do couples therapy or individual therapy, what advice do you have to that person who's in that relationship?
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
Because honestly, my honest response is that, and I say this to my clients too, especially to those that are anxiously attached.
Yeah.
And if they're with avoidant folks, which is almost always that attraction
Very
often happens,
common.
right?
Yeah.
Very common.
Yeah.
So it's not like, oh, find somebody that's not avoidant. It's not
Right.
that. The thing that I say to look for is, are they aware? Two things. One, are they aware of their own patterning enough to be curious about it? That's the most important thing. It's not that they're not avoidant, that they're secure, but like, is there some part of them that's willing to just like, not just go, if you just lay off of me, if you just get more secure, we'll be fine. That defense really is what I would say, that projection. If that's intact, I usually say that's not enough.
Yeah.
What is enough is like, are they willing to look inwards? Are they willing to acknowledge their own insecurities or vulnerabilities, not even have a full understanding of them or be able to talk about them, but just like that, there's a crack in the armor, and they're willing to kind of go, okay, I know there's something I need to look at here.
Yeah.
So I would say, like, they need to be willing to, whether it's therapy or couples therapy or their own individual or some healing modality.
Right. There's so many different healing modalities.
And so that's the thing I would say, that's almost like the baseline of what I would say you need in your partner. So if you're asking me if they're saying, no, I'm not willing to do this or that or that, right, I'd be like, I'm not sure this is the right person to work this through with.
Right.
And I will say, add to that, and sometimes, and I've had this recently, oh, but he's doing his work. I'm saying he because it's often he. It's not always he, but it's often he.
Yeah.
He or she are doing their work. They're so spiritual. They're meditating. They're going to retreats or even like ceremony, medicine work or whatever. As somebody who's done this myself, that doesn't mean they're looking at their patterning. It might be more the version that I've done, which is they're looking for transcendence. They're looking to rise above, and spirituality can be amazing because you can actually find something that's untouchable, imperturbable. But you always, you can still hide from your humanity and your vulnerability.
Yes.
So that's not enough, actually, unless it's a spirituality that's like really digging into emotions, sensations, patterning, relationships, and wounding.
Yeah.
That's my response.
I love that. I think that's so helpful. And I love that piece around the curiosity. Like, are they curious about what's happening for them? Are they curious about how to grow and heal? Are they curious about how to work with you around this stuff? Are they curious about their own defenses? Are they curious about their own, yeah, exactly, stuff that's getting stirred up? So I think that's a really powerful rubric to consider. And yeah, I just had one other question before we end, because yeah, there's so much to talk about here that we've kind of unraveled. And actually, a couple, maybe two more. But the first one, we're going to end soon, I promise. The first one is for the avoidant partners listening, or the avoidant single people listening. What would you say in terms, if they're feeling like they're on the fence, in terms like a part of them really wants to do the work and go deeper to become more securely attached and have a more secure relationship, and then a part of them is like, hell no, that is really like a waste of time, it's never going to work. I have to focus on my career, I have to focus on my purpose, things are fine. Yeah, what would you say to them?
Yeah, well, one is, I would say, I know that place. I've been there. I know that place, so I have a lot of compassion for it. It's a tricky thing if they're just, honestly, this is the thing with avoidance. I can say this myself. If you pursue them, they just get more avoidant.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm not going to try to convince an avoidant to not be avoidant. It just backfires. It only reinforces, like, you're telling me to be different and I'm not okay and I'm not enough, and screw you. I'm going to hold on to my autonomy and my freedom and my goodness and what's good about me, even more so, and what's important to me. So that's my first kind of response, is like, I'm not going to probably pursue or try to convince somebody who's avoidant to go deeper. But what I will do, and I can do this personally, is I can say, I know that place in you. I recognize that. I recognize it in me. And what I will say is, there's more to you. There's more to your life and to your relationships that is possible here. And if you really value your freedom, which is a strong value, a strong quality I recognize in myself, autonomy, freedom, self-reliance, like those are in you as an avoidant. Take it all away. Like be strong, be courageous, seek freedom in going into the dark places, in going towards the things that scare you. So that's what I would say, is like, there's a truth teller in you, there's a truth seeker in you. And that's what I always try to connect with anybody, is there something in you that is more interested in just your freedom, just your autonomy, just your projects, just your purpose. Those are huge. We want to manifest, we want to express, we want to live our best lives. And this comes back to the spiritual place again. There's something in us, in each of us, that wants truth, that wants the fullness of life to be lived. And so in some ways, I'm saying there's a fullness in your life that's awaiting, but it's behind these unopened doors, these darker doors. And in some ways, you almost have to take it on faith that there's something in there, But if you do the experiential work, the courageous work, then decide for yourself. Don't decide because your partner's telling you to do it. Don't decide because your therapist is telling you to. Don't decide because I'm telling you, or Maya's telling you to do it. But be honest with yourself. And what I had to do with be honest with myself is, like, as much as I projected all this stuff onto Karen early on, before even this sort of experiences that opened up, like, oh my God, like I found my little boy in my terrified places. I already had inklings of that. I already knew that something in me was scared, something in me was anxious, and I could see it so lit up large in her that even if you can see a little part of yourself in there, that's the little doorway. That's the place to just be curious and tender and compassionate with. And you might do it in yourself, but if you can find a trusting guide, a trusting other, or trusting practice even, then just take a step in that direction. And then you're always going to have to rely on your own experience, your own, truth. To me, life is the greatest teacher. So trust your own experience. That, like, I also guess I'm saying the other thing is, don't just trust your mind. Don't just trust your initial reaction. Don't just trust your familiar, just because you've been saying it 1,000 times or a million times or for years doesn't make it true. Be open to what is beyond your current understanding. So that's my best attempt in this moment.
Beautiful. I love that. And okay, the last question, which is for anxious listeners who are in a relationship with an avoidant, and maybe they're noticing that they're getting anxious because their partner hasn't responded to their text or hasn't asked them out again, or is not responsive in a particular way that they're really wanting them to be responsive. I'm wondering, because I think that's something that occurs so frequently in this dance. So I'm wondering, do you have any suggestions on what they can do or what they can tell themselves, how they can really self-regulate in that? Because really they can't get that reassurance from the outside. They're connected, they're attached to this person, right? Which we know is biological nervous system. It's happening. They are attached on so many levels: physical, emotional, sexual, sensual, all these levels, spiritual. They're attached, bonded with this other that is being unresponsive. Do you have anything that can help them, that you would kind of like tell them, or that they could do?
Well, I think there's multiple layers to this as well, and this is less my domain internally in terms of, but I can say this from my partner, from Karen, who's modeled and healed a lot of her own anxious attachment. A lot of different pieces. One is just to understand, just like I was saying to the avoidance, and for me it was really powerful just to recognize that I'm avoidant. And so what I'm projecting onto my partner, at some point I had to kind of go, it's not all 100% true. This is my own patterning. And so to recognize for me, this is me, kind of projecting my own insecurities or anxieties or onto them. That kind of softened the experience of what I was experiencing. I didn't believe the movie so much, the story I was projecting onto them. So the flip of that would be just understand your anxiety, understand your anxious patterning. The more you learn and understand it, and also how it manifests in your body, it doesn't make it go away. It doesn't mean you don't feel it, but there'll be a little bit of awareness that you can actually rely on to be like, I'm in my abandonment terror right now. I'm in my fearful story. And then you can, it's like that adult child, parent child thing. You can start to talk to your little one. Because that's what's going on. All the somatic, energetic, emotional stuff is the reason therapists and all these people use child, because it's a really good way, because it's a young part of it. It's a feeling part of us, the somatic part of us. But if you think about it as a child, it evokes a compassionate, nurturing adult, right? And so then you can speak to that part in a soothing way, in a regulating way, in a compassionate way. So that's the first step, is you can talk to that part, you can relax that part. And most importantly, you can actually start to say, what do you need? What do we need? And then it broadens out, because then there's practices and relationships that can be regulating. So I've seen Karen do this beautifully. Because otherwise, if you just keep going towards the person who's causing the anxiety, the avoidant person, you push them away, it exacerbates their defenses, it exacerbates your abandonment. So that's a no-go zone. But in some ways, you have to kind of have to tell yourself, beyond a certain point, you can't go towards them. You need to give them space. But then you can't just white knuckle it and go, okay, I'm just going to dysregulate into oblivion here. Then you go, okay, what do I need? Can I get in a bath and listen to music, or can I call a dear friend, or go get a hug, or go out in nature, or do the things that are regulating and soothing for you in those moments. And all you're trying to do, honestly, in some ways, in those moments, is just, if you can calm your system down by 10% or 20%, that's huge. You might actually, from that place, be able to have a different text message or voicemail message with your partner that isn't pulling on them or judging them or clinging on them, which is going to push them away. Energetically now, you might be able to kind of be, hey, sweetheart, just want to check in with you. I know you're doing your own thing, or you need to be in your own space, or we're in a difficult moment right now, but I'm sending you love. And I'd love to hear just a check-in from you, or contact would be good. And it's a different thing because here's the thing, actually, a lot I could say, and I know we're kind of ending time. The thing that I needed to feel from Karen, so pivotal, like a lot of pivotal moments for me was, I won't go into the whole story, but we were in a breakup. This is 2 years into our relationship. And we broke up for a week. I broke up with her, and it was intense for her and for me.
Wow.
And we came back together, and what she had faced in that week, and this, I'm not saying it has to be this dramatic, but I think what she faced in a big way is kind of a microcosm of what I think we need to kind of, anxious people need to kind of do in small ways. She'd gone into this like total loss, rejection, abandonment place because I'd broken it off, and it was pretty serious. Like, I thought we couldn't do it. I couldn't stay in the uncertainty in the dance we were doing. It was too painful for me and for her, and I just kind of wanted to break it off for in some ways, honestly, more for her than for me. I just felt like I was putting her through hell, and for me. But what she did in that week, she went into the descent of aloneness, despair, abandonment, rejection. But she went to a really good friends of ours, really good friends of hers at the time, a couple, and she spent the whole week with them. And she cried with them, and she went through her grief and her loss and her aloneness. And then at the end of that week, we came back together, we sat together, and we had this really incredible conversation. And I'd been sad and depressed, and also gone through waves of freedom. And if you're avoidant, you'll notice this, like in the immediate aftermath of a breakup, you'll be like, oh my God, I can breathe. Oh my God, I'm free. And I'd gone through that, but then it also was like, oh my God, I miss her. And like, am I really doing the right thing? But I wasn't going to go back until something shifted. So here's what shifted. We came back together. We sat there. I remember like being really kind of just sort of being in silence and having candlelight and connecting. And I thought we were breaking up, and we thought we were breaking up. And she said something to me that really touched me. It was pivotal. She said, this has been hell. I've been through the worst week ever, but I've been through it. And I had friends holding me, and I faced my aloneness. And she said, I realized that I want your happiness and I want your freedom as much as I want my own. And so if this is what you need to be happy and to be free, I love you and I release you. And something just touched me so deeply in that, because a projection broke off of her. Because what she was saying to me, and she did say this to me, the projection onto me that I was going to be her savior, her rescuer. She just saw me as human. And she saw my little boy in that moment, and was saying, I just see you and I see your needs. And if you need to be alone, then okay. And I'm willing to grieve that and let you go. And paradoxically, I felt her love, and I felt seen. And my projection off of her is like, oh my God, she's just going to be this needy person that's going to consume me. And I just have to exist for her needs. That fell away in that moment. And so something in my heart opened, and I felt a possibility open up. Which is like, I wanted to go towards her. It's like, oh, you love me. Oh, I love you. Maybe we can be together. And so I'm telling a whole story because there's a powerful story, but in there is like, the more space you can open up to be with your own abandonment, and you might need a lot of help with it. The more space you open up for your partner to feel, oh, they can be seen. There's space for them in here too, because you're not so desperately clinging to them as the answer, the savior, the rescuer. And so that's what an avoidant needs.
It's real, like a real separate sense of self. And that, I think also what you're speaking to is the acceptance, like accept that, in my opinion, acceptance is one of the deepest forms of love. So her being able to accept you exactly as you are and see you exactly as you are helped you feel her love in a true, really true way. And that opened your heart. So
that's it.
So beautiful.
So that was the pivot point. Like we were breaking up, and then something opened in that. And then a lot of work happened together and separately that allowed that. But that was a pivotal, heart opening kind of moment between us.
Thank you so much for sharing that. So beautiful to hear that moment. Wow. So such a rich interview. I'm so, so grateful for you for coming on the show. It's been such a powerful interview to be able to touch into both avoidant attachment, the anxious avoidant dance, as well as the connection with spirituality and how much that can also really enhance our secure attachment and our secure attachment in relationship. So yeah, if you are listening to this and you're really wanting to deeply, uncover these places inside of yourself and really go deeper into this work, as well as really create that internal security as well as secure attachment in relationship, I would love to help you. So you can go to empowerlove.us /love to empowerlove.us /apply to book a free love breakthrough session. And I'm working with men one-on-one, and then also with women one-on-one and in my group. And then also, if you're interested in finding out more about Riyaz and also about his meditation and inquiry retreats, you can go to, what's your website?
It's my full name, riyazmotan.com.
Wonderful. And we'll also put all of that information in the show notes. So thank you so much. And such an honor and a pleasure to be with you today.
Wow. So welcome. Pleasure and honor to be with you. Thank you, Maya. I love the work that you're doing. Yeah.
Thank you. And we'll see you guys on the next one.